Okay, right, apologies. I've got to keep my voice down. I've literally just put my daughter to bed in the room next door, so yeah, do bear with. But here's the story on these wheels, right? So I was in Shanghai a couple months back for the bike show, and via one of the people that I met while I was over there, this company Upvine dropped me a message. Now, I'd not heard of Upvine before, but apparently they're relatively well known in China. So they'd actually sent a few wheel sets over to a wind tunnel in Silverstone to do a bit of testing. And once that was done, they asked if I wanted to check them out. Now, it's not actually that far from me, so I drove over. I was expecting one wheel set, but there were 4 enormous boxes. I just about squeezed all of them into the back of the car and brought them home. There were 2 really nice looking carbon spoked wheels and 2 more regular steel spoked ones. Now, the carbon spoked wheel sets looked really tasty, but once I got the scales out, there was one particular pair that definitely caught my attention. Here's how they all stack up. This 50mm deep steel spoked wheel set, 1,445 grams, pretty decent. These 60mm deep carbon spoked ones, 1,404. These 50mm deep carbon spoked wheels, 1,322 grams, which is pretty good. And these 52mm Inertia branded wheels, 1,259 grams. The Inertia wheels looked lovely, the hubs were really nice, and the quality seemed very high. Clearly a kind of race-focused wheel set, and I assumed because they were the lightest of the bunch, they were probably going to be quite expensive, but actually far from it. The most expensive wheels were those 60mm deep carbon spoked ones. Now, Upvine don't have any dealers in the UK yet, but suggested retail on those is about 1,500 quid. They are very nice wheels, and a bit more on that later, but admittedly, that's quite up there, right? But these Inertia ones are just 525 quid. That absolutely blew me away. For a wheel set in this weight category, it's nuts. So let me give you a bit of perspective.
So firstly, Hunt, well known for good value wheel sets. Their closest in terms of makeup is their 50 carbon disc, currently on sale for 720 quid, but weighing nearly 1,500 grams. Bontrager have their ALOT RSL 51, closer at around 1,400 grams, but retails for 1,200 quid. And Scope have their R4s, a bit shallower at 45mm deep and pricey at 1,400 quid plus nearly 1,600 grams. Zip, you've got the 353 NSWs at about 1,300 grams. Admittedly, they are wider, and we'll get to that in a sec, but 2,500 quid for these. And finally, the Campagnolo Hyperon Ultra wheels, 1,240 grams, but much shallower at 37mm deep and 2,700 quid. So look, I'm sure there are some other comparisons to draw, and yeah, stick them in the comments if you have them. But for a 52mm deep wheel set weighing well under 1,300 grams, 525 quid is very competitive. So let me give you the lowdown on these wheels. 52mm deep carbon rim, no spoke holes, so easy tubeless setup, 21mm internal and 28 external, and like I said, really nice looking hubs. Apparently Upvine have their own hub factory, so these are made in-house, which is cool, and the spoke nipples are all titanium. Now, that actually makes them a few grams heavier than regular aluminium ones, adding about 4 grams per wheel, but in return, you get excellent corrosion resistance, so virtually no risk of nipples cracking or seizing from sweat or salt on the roads or whatever. Again, crazy to see at this price. So I mentioned the hubs look nice, but often a good indicator on quality are the bearings and axles. Now, the bearings are from a company called Chai Pro. They're a Chinese manufacturer, but I've not actually heard of them. And the seals do look pretty standard, so I assume they are top tier, but they do seem to be decent quality steel bearings. However, the tolerances on the axles really surprised me.
So as you might have guessed, I use a 360 camera to capture a lot of my ride footage. I've already used it quite extensively in this episode. Actually, it's the X5 from Insta360, and it's legitimately a crucial bit of equipment for me. Now, I love this thing. I'd recommend it to anyone, really. And they've just released a massive firmware update for the summer. The list of improvements is absolutely vast, actually, but I want to quickly focus on 2 things. Firstly, a new adaptive tone option. So essentially, when one side of the scene is really bright, bright and the other side is really dark. Sometimes the camera would struggle to kind of balance the exposure across both lenses. But with this new mode, it independently records the lighting data for each of those lenses separately. So essentially, when you're in the edit on desktop or within the app and you move the scene, it automatically balances the exposure for you. So it should save you a bunch of time in the edit and essentially make shooting in challenging lighting environments a little bit easier. Secondly, they've released the first ND filters for a 360 camera. So you can get them in 16, 32 or 64, and they act like lens guards. So you can snap them on and off really easily. And when you combine it with the fact that you can manually set the ISO and the shutter speed, you can get some really cool in-camera motion blur effects, which for like a consumer 360 camera is pretty nuts. Yeah, it's quite cool. So yeah, those are just two of the updates, but there are loads. Like I said, they've improved battery life again, and they've updated the apps to make editing much easier, which is cool. But yeah, I really love Insta360 stuff. I've used it for years at this point, so if you want to check them out, I'll put a link down in the description for you. But yeah, thanks for sticking with, and let's crack on. So I've got the axle here for the front wheel, and yeah, it was pretty tough to remove. The bearings appear to have been pressed on to the axles. Normally when you've got the axle like this, the bearings, it's a nice tight fit, but they usually slide on and off relatively easily. Here, it feels like they've been pressed on, and in order to get this off, I'd need like a bearing puller. I mean, it's a good thing in a way, and the axle certainly does look nice and chunky, so it's got that nice stepped bit. But yeah, I did struggle to remove the rear axle. I'm sure if I gave myself a few more minutes and a few extra tools, I could pull it out. But yeah, the tolerances with regards to bearing fit are extremely tight, which is good, but makes servicing slightly more difficult. Okay, so here's the rear axle. After a little bit of effort, I managed to extract it from the rear hub. Again, this bearing on here is, well, it's a really tight fitment around the axle. Looks pretty good, nicely machined. And here is the free hub. So yeah, nothing particularly special about this 4-pawl free hub, although each of those pawls has those sort of additional teeth on there. So I guess you could argue 8 points of contact around the ratchet ring in there rather than 4. But yeah, again, the tolerances around bearing clearances, they were similar to the front, so very, very tight fitment. Pretty good to see, but does make extraction quite difficult. Now, unfortunately, when I removed the rear axle and this free hub from the rear wheel, you can see I did balk up this bearing, the one on the back of the free hub. It's a different color because yeah, I was a bit rough potentially extracting it, or something was off, and this is now a little bit crunchy. So I've just pulled it out and I've pressed in this one here into the back, and now that's nice and smooth, so that's all good to go. But while this is out, it does give me an opportunity to show you just how good the fitment is with these bearings around the axles. All right, so let's get this on the end here. And it's got to be dead nuts on. Absolutely zero wiggle room here. And I've got to, well, if I wanted to get it all the way down the shaft here, I'd need to kind of press it on, which I don't really want to do. Needless to say, the tolerances are extremely tight. Maybe a little bit too tight for my tastes, honestly. But still, yeah, pretty impressive stuff for yeah, Wheelset at this price range. So yeah, the tolerances on the bearing seats in both the hub shell and the axle journals are impressively tight. Maybe a little bit too tight for my liking, but still remarkable at this price point, to be honest with you. Anyway, I've had these wheels on the bike about 2 weeks at this point, and I've done about 250 miles. Admittedly, not loads, but I think enough for a pretty good shakedown. Here are my thoughts. Right then, let's talk about ride characteristics for this wheel set here. Really, really nice. I guess first and foremost, nice and snappy, nice and agile feeling, and a lot of that is to do with the weight, right? At 1,259 grams, well, it's on the low end, especially for a wheel set this deep. It feels like they spin up fast, especially when you get out of the saddle to put the power down. They just feel nice and agile, nice and speedy. And I suspect this kind of agile feeling is assisted by the lacing setup. So if I show you here, both wheels use 24 spokes, front and rear, which is quite a high spoke count actually. And in addition, every single one of the spokes uses 2 cross lacing. So you can see crosses 1 spoke, 2 spoke. Often you'll find on wheel sets that are chasing really low weight, you'll get a 2 cross lacing on the drive side, then on the non-drive side of the hub, it'll be radially laced. Now this can reduce weight and it does look pretty flashy as well, but it can reduce a little bit of stiffness in the wheel. So I suspect having 2-cross on both sides of the hub here does assist in that kind of really snappy, agile feeling, getting the power down. And as we're talking spokes, yeah, these are all steel. I'm used to riding carbon spoked wheel sets these days. Actually, maybe I'm a little bit spoiled in that regard. But the last few wheel sets I've tried have all been steel spoked, and I do really like a steel spoked wheel, actually. There's just something about it. It does add a little bit of elasticity because much like the steel frame it's running, yes, steel does have a little bit of stretch, a little bit of give in it. So on a lot of the B roads that I tend to ride down, they're not perfect. I mean, this one is quite nice actually, but yeah, having steel spokes does, well, it just absorbs a little bit more of that buzz compared to carbon spoked. Carbon spoked wheel sets, they're great if you want a really stiff, racy feeling wheel set, but steel spokes just add a little bit more compliance. Now, the lateral stiffness on these was good. It wasn't like tip top, which honestly is fine by me because, like I said, it does add a little bit more compliance to the wheel set. So in essence, they ride really nicely, nice and agile and snappy feeling, but not uber harsh and really stiff like a lot of carbon spoked wheel sets. Yeah, just a really good balance. The one thing I wish they were though is a 23mm internal. So these are 21mm internal. So I'm running 700 by 30s on here, and there is a little bit of ballooning on the tire. So I wish they were 23 internal, but honestly, that's my only gripe with them. Other than that, these are a really lovely wheel set, especially on the type of B roads I run on. Yeah, can't complain.
Now, back in the garage, I also checked lateral trueness. Both front and rear were really good with less than 1mm of deviation, and while I was at it, I also measured the spoke tension. Now, overall, it was pretty solid, though admittedly not the best I've seen. For context, a 10% variance in tension is considered okay, and under 5% is excellent. In this case, 12 spokes were outside the 5% range, most were pretty close to 5, but there was one as high as 11.2%. So regarding spoke tension, overall I would consider this like a B+. Certainly pretty good, just not top tier.
So the final word on these wheels, right? Pretty outstanding for the money. Honestly, I mean, sure, the spoke tension could be a little more consistent, and personally, I'm not a huge fan of the big decals that they've printed on the rim, but to get a wheel set this lightweight and well made from a legitimate manufacturer at this price, I mean, yeah, that's pretty remarkable. Also, do keep in mind, I picked all these wheels up from a wind tunnel in Silverstone, right? It's not like these guys, well, they don't seem to be a casual outfit chasing a quick, marketing money grab or whatever. They appear to be investing some real time and money into research and development. And I had a look at the warranty as well. I'll put the salient bits up on screen for you, and the full terms are in the description if you're interested. But yeah, it's pretty extensive actually, which shows they're kind of standing behind their product. But the big kicker with these wheels right now, Upvine are focusing on B2B sales at the moment. So they don't actually have a retail site where you can go ahead and purchase these wheels, or much of a dealer network outside of China, really. I'm told they're working on both those things at the moment, but yeah, currently if you want to get a set, you've got to contact them directly via email, Instagram, WhatsApp, or WeChat. Actually, if you've got it, chances are you'll be talking to the same lady I've been, and yeah, she's lovely, really helpful. But yeah, do bear in mind, if you get hold of a set and you need to, use that warranty or whatever, you'll be dealing directly with someone in China. It's not like you can go through your local bike shop to sort it out, so do bear that in mind. Now, full Uber transparency for you here. When I went to pick up these wheels from Silverstone, I didn't have any agreement with Upvine, no payment terms, no nothing. Basically, they were either going to have to ship all the wheel sets back to China once testing was done, or I could just, go and pick them up and see what they were like. I made absolutely no promises to them. I mean, I didn't even know the prices of all the wheels. It was just kind of an opportunity that I said yes to. But because that inertial wheel set has really impressed me and the price point is so compelling, I have asked them for a little bit of commission on any wheel sets they sell. So if you mention me when you message them, you get a slightly better price, and I get 25 quid per wheel set that they sell. So not exactly a fortune, but it does help pay a couple of the bills around here, which is, yeah, always good. But that's it, just trying to be very, very open with you. That's the deal. Now, as it happens, Upvine have actually asked me to send 2 of these wheel sets. I've got the camera just sat on top of 4 big wheel set boxes. Yeah, they asked me to send 2 of them up to which I'm gonna do later on this week. So I'll be interested to hear what he's got to say, so keep an eye out for that. And And yeah, that about wraps it up. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.
It's the bonus clip time.
Right, so it is admittedly a bit of a tip in the garage at the moment. I've just pulled everything out, so let me step in here. Now, it is for good reason, and I'll cover that in a second, but yeah, let's start with these wheels quickly. So I showed these briefly earlier. These are the 60mm deep carbon spoked wheel set, and yeah, I've had them on the bike a couple days at this point, and yeah, they are really, really nice. I mean, they're... Excuse me. they're quite expensive, 1,500 quid. God, this place is a tip. Yeah, quite expensive, 1,500 quid, but they do ride really, really well. So I'm going to keep them on the bike for the time being, and yeah, I'll keep you updated on those. But yeah, let me take a quick second to explain why this place is such a tip. So in the bonus clip for the last episode I published, actually, I showed that I was working on a lateral stiffness testing rig for wheel sets, and I'll throw up a little bit of footage so you can see it. Basically, it's an old turbo trainer that I had. I locked a rear wheel inside, then using a 10-kilo weight on a pulley system under my desk, I was able to kind of pull the wheel across and then measure the deflection. And then off the back of that, I was able to get a kind of stiffness reading. The thing is, it wasn't particularly consistent or super repeatable. Actually, I realized there was probably quite a lot of slop in the system, and the actual stiffness number I got out the back of the rig was about half as stiff as the published figures for those wheel sets. So it was quite a long way off. I wasn't confident enough to stand behind those figures, basically, especially if I'm recommending wheel sets based on stiffness and potentially criticizing companies if the wheels aren't stiff enough. I need to be able to stand behind my figures a little bit more, so I redesigned the whole thing, hence the mess. This is what I'm working with in terms of this new stiffness jig, right? The basis of it is this M12 threaded rod running through the middle. It's just under 12 mil in diameter, so works perfectly, basically, because throw axles for road wheels are all 12 millimeters in diameter, so I can slide everything on and bolt it down. I've clamped it to the side of my desk here using these L brackets with 4 M8 bolts on either side. So this is really nicely secured in there. I then got 10 kilos on a string with a pulley system, right? And you can see I've got that hook. So essentially what I do is I clamp the wheel in like so with these M12 nuts and washers. Then I can use that hook to pull either side of this dial gauge, and then I can get deflection reading. It works nicely. It's pretty easy to set up each time, and it's consistent as well. So hopefully you'll see behind me, I've been using it to test all my wheel sets to kind of get results. I've even run a couple of wheel sets through twice on both wheels to make sure I get the same results each time, and I do, so consistency is good. And I can test front and rear wheels as well. On the other rig, I could only do the rear wheel, so that's a massive benefit as well. Now, the one thing I did sort of play around with when I was setting this up and doing a bit of testing was whether or not to make the whole structure really rigid, i.e. Whether or not to support this threaded rod. Now, ideally, what I would do is create a really rigid structure around this with like steel arms and stuff to make sure nothing was moving. But that's obviously not really feasible. As it sits though, well, I can show you. This arm that the dial gauge is attached to is kind of separated from any bending movement, because I'll get that hook, pull it over the top of the wheel like so, and you'll see the threaded rod does lift, and it lifts about ½ centimeter actually with 10 kilos on it. But the bending moment ends at the hub right here. So this arm isn't affected by any of those forces, essentially meaning that I can still get an accurate reading from this dial gauge. So this was the other setup, exactly the same, but I've got this threaded rod in the top. And if I unscrew this nut, you can see there's a nut in the desk there. That's basically because I took one of these long connecting nuts and epoxied it into the desk right here. And then I can secure it down and I can mount it onto this L bracket here. I found that when I took readings with this, they started to be way off. And I think it's essentially because this arm is no longer separated from those bending forces. It kind of becomes a part of the whole system. So just threw all the readings off. I thought in my head intrinsically, this structure is inherently more rigid, right? So I was going to get better results, but that wasn't the case. case. So I found through trial and error that not having this threaded rod through and leaving this arm kind of freestanding and just bolted securely at the bottom, my readings were much closer to kind of published figures and just much better. So yeah, that's what I'm sort of working with. It's yeah, pretty good, I think, for testing in a garage. It's not like lab quality results, right? It is bolted to the side of an IKEA desk after all, but the results are consistent and repeatable, which I think is important. I take 6 readings per wheel, 3 drive, 3 non-drive. I make sure I test a spoke in tension, spoke out of tension, and yeah, take a measurement at the valve hole each time. And it's the same for every wheel set. I also use the same hardware, same spacing, and take readings from the same point at the rim on each wheel set. So I think, well, basically I'm pretty happy to stand behind the results. I think the actual stiffness rating I get in newtons per millimeter is a little bit high, honestly, by about 10-15%, but it's consistent across all my results. So in terms of comparing wheel sets, I think it's absolutely fine. Now, in terms of the lateral stiffness for this inertial wheel set that I've been showing you, I'll put the results up on screen. Not outstanding, but pretty good, considering this wheel set is designed with a lightweight first mentality, if you catch my drift. So nice lightweight hubs, thin steel spokes to reduce weight, and quite thin walls on the carbon rim there, again, to reduce the weight. So kind of unsurprisingly, not the stiffest wheel set in the world, but still pretty good, all things considered, if you ask me. But yeah, there you go. Those are the wheels, and that's the lateral stiffness rig that I've kind of put together as well. So yeah, do let me know what you think about both those things. I'll be really interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, and that's it. See you next time.